Go for the money and lead the pack, push the throttle and burn the track. Curl and swirl like you're doing a dance. Straightaway's coming and now's your chance. On the speedway, on the speedway, on the speedway. That, by the way, is Speedway by Elvis Presley for obvious reasons. Welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me over there shaking his hips, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
How you doing, Drew? I'm doing great over here. Should we do the whole podcast like that? I'm doing great. Have you seen that Elvis movie? It's very good. It really makes you want to
I am seeing it on Thursday.
Oh, terrific. Well, I won't blame it. I won't spoil it then. Everything works out fine.
Fantastic. Also joining us, Rob Zagna. How are you, Rob?
Not too bad. You know, inevitably, we're going to do Speedway, the movie.
It is from a movie called Speedway, that song. Thank you guys for holding it down while I got married last week.
Oh, is that what it was? Oh,
that's the event you came to.
That's
Danny.
what that party was. I thought it was
Yeah.
I thought it was like a late night bar mitzvah with like a lot of older people. I don't know. There you go.
Yeah, just really late in my. I peaked, I'm a late bloomer. We missed you, Rob. But you were
I
there
missed you
spirit.
guys, man. I like, there are not many friends left who are going to be getting married. Well,
Yeah.
knock on wood. You know, I'm hoping that most of my
For the first
friends
time.
are not getting married
point.
from here again.
There could be a second wave, in 15 years.
Yep.
If you're new to the podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we recommend listening to our preseason primer episode, which assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 216. Also, this show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release an ad-free version of this podcast, along with bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. So what do we have going on this month, Danny?
The strike, the SAG-AFTRA strike has also ended. So the struck work has flown down the tubes at us. So
The green flag is waving.
Exactly. So we're going to pick out not just this month, but next month's. This month we're going to do Brawn, the Impossible Formula One Story, which is the documentary, which was, I definitely know, hosted, but also produced perhaps by Keanu Reeves. It's available on, am I crazy? Is this on Disney Plus?
It's on Hulu. So
It's Hulu.
Maybe, probably. I don't know.
Okay. I mean, they're all owned by the
Maybe
same company.
ESPN
Nah,
Plus as well?
exactly. Yeah, who
Yeah, I don't
knows?
know.
Good point, actually. It would fit on any of them. We're going to do that, and then we're going to do Gran Turismo for December. So if you want to catch up on the two of those movies, and you're a patron of ours, feel free to do so, or join up at the end of the season. Do the life hack. Become a patron right at the end of the season, and then listen to all of the podcasts during the break until we come back again. But massive thanks to all of our incredible title sponsors: Mojo Nixon Gaming, Get Rich or Die Ryan, Agave ATX, Typhus Training, Turf SCS, at Team Blackjack, Michael Mabes, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, telemetryduck.com, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foot, Abdullah Al-Thani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us podcast, $, Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Valtar, Circuit Demon, Umberto Roca, Troy Stammer, mixing it up there, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Madden Man, Jason Kelly, and Tracy Family welcomes Nico. There you go. Our second Shift F1 baby. Thanks so much. Ellie is probably a bouncing 3-month-old now or something. Welcome, Nico. Great F1 name as well. It should be mentioned, Nico. Yeah.
Indeed.
And also shout out to all of Drew's amazing family who all apparently listen to this podcast. That's what I learned at the wedding last weekend. So shout out to all of your lovely family who came up and said, hey.
Get those numbers up somehow.
Exactly right.
Yeah, all right. Well, we got a new, it doesn't happen every day. Every season even. We got a new track.
Yeah.
And we are going to get to that. But before that, we've got the news here. And from a new track to a new power unit manufacturer, Rob?
Maybe. We'll see if this comes to pass, because this seems like a part of Andretti pulling out all the stops to try to make this F1 thing happen. So so General Motors registered to become an engine supplier for 2028 and beyond, which means, of course, they are too late to take part in the 2026 like development sweepstakes and such. They will be joining late, ceding a multi-year head start to whoever they be coming up against. But this also feels very much like it is meant to. Well, it doesn't feel like it is. It is explicitly meant to bolster the Andretti, the Andretti's attempt to create and run an 11th F1 team. This is squarely aimed at FOM, which is the conglomerate of teams that run the sport. They like the really important thing to note about the GM registration and promise to become an engine supplier is they aren't doing this unless Andretti is on the grid. Apparently Williams was quick to register interest in being a customer team for a GM/Cadillac engine, and GM shut that down. They are doing this to be an Andretti supplier, and if Andretti's not in the sport, GM will not be in the sport. Now, the other thing, Autosport had some analysis of this. It's clearly a pressure move aimed to indicate again, this is a response to, remember when the GM partnership was first announced, the other teams poo-pooed the idea that it was a meaningful partnership. They essentially said this is a branding exercise. That car is not going to be a Cadillac. It's not going to be a General Motors car. It's going to be it's going to be a similar situation to Haas almost, where it's a car built from other people's parts. It's not going to be a new manufacturer entry. GM putting its performance development muscle behind this does make it real. So that is a pretty clear response to the critique that Andretti wouldn't be bringing American automotive manufacturing muscle to the in F1. I suspect it is also maybe meant to bust some of the solidarity among the FOM teams, the existing teams, because one of the things that I'm not sure we hear about as much as we used to, but there's always anxiety about are there enough engine suppliers?
Yeah.
Is it easy enough to? These things are expensive and they take a long time to make. So I think a few years ago when it was really down to just three suppliers. There was a lot of hand wringing about, they were kind of at the limits of how many teams they could support. And so I do suspect there would be a lot of teams, not the manufacturer teams, that would be really interested to have another possible supplier out there that they could do business with, that isn't that isn't Mercedes, Alpine, etc.
This will be, at that point, if this happens, that will be the 7th manufacturer. Right. We've got Alpine, Audi by that point will be a manufacturer.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Ferrari, Honda, which Aston Martin will be using, Mercedes, and Red Bull Ford.
Yep.
So their cup floweth over.
Well, by 2028, it is possible not all those engine manufacturers will be around.
Saying 2 years might be enough.
Yeah, right now, Alpine's engine has kind of sucked. If that happens again, you do kind of wonder if they're going to keep, as a manufacturer, they would certainly feel obliged to do so. But historically, the trend has been to not keep engine suppliers around. Though it is an odd moment, Audi coming in is supposedly going to be effectively take over the Sauber team. So, it is possible this is not as exciting, or this is about the least exciting moment that announcing a new engine supplier could possibly be. But the other thing the Autosport article did note is that it's very clear now from the FIA having endorsed the Andretti bid and the various ways Andretti has tried to accommodate every single objection and hurdle placed in front of them, that if the bid is rejected, this probably goes to court. Like this, like it would, like F1's been the teams have been very transparent about why they're doing this, right? They don't want to further dilute the prize pool. They don't want a new competitive entrant that they're racing against. That's going to siphon prize money away and not like grow the pie. But it is possible that justification and then sort of blocking a good faith bid in this way will run afoul of some like regulatory laws. Like Autosport suggested that this goes before an antitrust body in the EU if they reject this. So, I think FOM would very much, the teams would prefer Andretti is forced to buy one of the existing teams, that somebody gets a chance to exit, their second team or whatever with a healthy payday, or Haas finally gets a chance. Gene Haas finally gets a chance to stop repairing busted cars and just offload the entire operation onto someone else. They clearly want that. If they're not going to let Andretti sort of build their own organization from the ground up and enter, and along the way they also kill GM's interest in taking part in the sport. The fallout from that could be ugly, and it could enter like weird legal territory, especially since again, the teams are kind of out on their own on this. Like the FIA wants another team.
Yeah,
the FIA is cool with this,
and the fans do. I think you could argue. I think unless you're like a super competitive fan of if you're Tifosi or something, maybe you're anxious about it. But I think I would imagine a lot of fans would like it, and especially in America, like Haas sort of was a promise of that in a way, and they're clearly not very.
It's basically a crummy dollar, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about here, and I do think like the American market stuff, probably too much is made of that because like American F1 fans, people who fell in love with F1, like they fell in love with it despite the fact there's not an F1 team, and I don't think that fandom is like, oh, if only there were an American here, I would.
Or maybe even because.
Yeah, right. But I do think, just from the standpoint of like, okay, here's a question. From what we know about this Andretti bid, they say it gets greenlit. They come into the sport. First year, where do you think they finish in the constructor standings?
Yeah, last or second last or third last.
I don't think so.
No,
I think they Do you think with this bid, do you think Andretti, with like the backing of GM, do you think they can put together a car that's better than Haas? I do.
Yeah. They point. Oh yes. They pointed out. GM did that. Like, hey, we make that LMP1 car.
Yeah.
And it did all right. And I think that's a compelling argument.
it's just so hard because it's such a unique formula.
It's not like they know nothing about racing, right? It's just
Yeah,
Sorry.
It's such a unique formula though, and also the specific way in which they lock like upgrades, like so much of the powertrain, the engine stuff is fairly locked in at a certain stage, and you're only just tweaking aero and other bits and bobs into the season. Like I just think, like, we talk a lot about.
Well, they'd be coming into 2026 when the freeze is lifted. Like, so 2026, I don't think they're going to have new engines come in and immediately do a performance freeze again.
Okay.
So I think there will be a chance to like get it right and iterate. I think it will be less like the situation we've got right now, which is like, sorry, the formula locked and you ran a bad car and now you're stuck tweaking a bad car.
I wonder if, I remember we talked about this, I don't know, earlier this year, there was some stage we were talking about just like the limited, like, it's not quite brain drain. We'd be brain drained from another team maybe, but just like the limited amount of people that have the expertise to do this sort of like, high level engineering. Like I worry there if there's or maybe there's not. Maybe F1 as it's growing, you have people at the top and these proteges in their fields who are getting lots of experience at the moment, and there's more people. But yeah, I don't know. I'm always so reticent of thinking that like just because. I've watched things like Brawn's Impossible Story and Red Bull, you know what I mean? Like teams that had no right being as successful as they were. And then looking at teams like Ferrari, whose literal modus operandi is to be an F1 team. Like, arguably, that's the main reason Ferrari exists. Selling cars is a side hustle. So, and they can't put it together. So, like, you know, I'm always like so reticent to believe that just effort and money can get you there.
I am, but I do think this would be an effort. Like, I don't think we'll see anything like the charge of the doomed F1 teams we saw like 10, 12 years ago, right? When it was like Caterham, HRT, Marussia. Was Virgin also in there? There's a whole like era where it was just like a revolving door of like train wreck F1 teams that didn't have a snowball's chance. I think like with the seriousness of the Haas organization, the resources they bring to bear,
the Haas organization.
Like for instance, I just don't see someone like in Drive to Survive, someone calling Michael Andretti and being like, "Sorry, man, we have to pay for a car to be replaced." Like Gene Haas is like, how dare you wreck a car in an F1 race? Like, that's ridiculous. So I can easily imagine like Andretti coming in and moving squarely to like being competitive with the mid-table. I can see them like blowing past Alpha, blowing past Haas, Williams too.
Yeah, it depends what Williams is. Williams is such a joker at the moment. I can't tell what direction they're going in. You know
I like to think in 2 years James Vowles will have it like just humming along.
I love that'd be amazing. I want to see
first
Albon
Williams
up there.
championship ever in the post Frank Williams era.
Well, let's move on to Red Bull. Danny, what's Christian Horner been saying?
It's really hard to read. This is like I can't tell if I'm more or less worried for Perez. I really can't. I've read this article 15 times and I cannot tell. If Rob put it very acutely before we started, it was like my T-shirt that says Checo has a job next year is raising questions about whether or not Checo has a job next year. Christian Horner was interviewed during the weekend in Brazil about the team's intention to keep Perez for next season. Obviously, this has been, you know, part of the narrative of Perez's entire career, but obviously with the fight for second this year and I think the rise of Daniel Ricciardo somewhat has played into this narrative a little bit too. So he was asked pretty straight up over the weekend. This is on, just to see if there was someone in particular asked him. This is an Autosport article. I'm assuming it was them. Yeah, Autosport it was, in Brazil about it. So we have some lines from Horner here. We'll give him all the support we can to ensure that he finishes second in the Drivers' Championship, but there's no prerequisite that if he doesn't finish second, you're out. And then they were pressed about some of the wording that he had said, that it was their intention to keep him next year. And I asked him, does that mean that like he still might not be? And he said, I am absolutely confident and clear that Checo will be our driver next year. And then he sort of, I don't know why he bothered, but then he sort of decided to, you know, underscore the fact that if he was injured or something, obviously then, you know, he wouldn't be our driver. But, you know, there's a clear...
Is that a threat?
Yeah, it was very... it was completely
if, God
unnecessary.
forbid, something were to happen
I mean,
to
if he
him.
died, we couldn't put him in the car, you know, like...
Like, just imagine, like, for instance, like, if he's, like, walking along and, like, someone's having a grand piano delivered.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, very tragically, like, it just falls and flattens him into a pancake, then obviously he would not be our driver.
It seemed like you know, when you're lying and you sort of over-explain something, you know, it's like kind of seemed a bit like that. So I mean, who knows? We're planning. He said that apparently Checo's thick skin has been an important part of them continuing to work with him this year, despite all of the you know, media reports and stuff going around the background. That and the fact that he was, you know, given racist abuse by one of the people in the organization. Good thing he's got thick skin, I guess, when you're over in Red Bull land.
Like, for me, though, I am confident that Sergio has a contract that pretty much guarantees he's starting next season with them. Like, he's guaranteed.
That is known. He does.
Yeah, of course.
It's
The
whether or not
question-
after 5 races and he's
Yeah.
eating dirt. Yeah.
Like it really depends. Like what's the break clause in it? There has to be one. And so by the end of a contract, last contract year, maybe it makes sense to exercise it. I do wonder, had Max not been able to secure the championship single-handed for constructors,
Right.
basically, if he hadn't been able to do that, does Red Bull show as much patience? I'm not sure how much Red Bull cares about constructors. Like, I know that's the big thing for the teams, but I do think Red Bull, like, the drivers are the heroes. This is the big thing.
That's
that people
always
watch the
been
sport,
their
the sport
angle.
for.
Yeah, I think I think that's always been the Red Bull way, is that the constructors is not their focus. I do think it would have been egg on their face had they not gotten it. So I think that doesn't help. But yeah, I'm with you on that. And from a monetary standpoint, obviously, it's not something the Red Bull organization is going to particularly, care about. Whereas other teams, that money might be a bit more of a leveraging issue.
A team like Haas, who finished 11th and 14th in the United States Grand Prix at the Circuit of the Americas. They then called for a review of that race to the stewards, that track limits infringements by rival drivers were not issued, and therefore those would have penalized those drivers ahead of Haas and may have promoted one or both of the Haas drivers into points scoring positions. So Haas called for this review, and it was rejected. And I think it's pretty interesting why it was rejected. So I'm quoting here from a racefans.net article, which is also quoting from a release by the stewards that says the evidence that Haas submitted, which was basically that Haas went and submitted some onboard camera footage showing drivers like Albon in particular going off track.
Yeah.
But as the release states, that evidence was, quote, not sufficient to accurately and consistently, meaning for every car in every lap, penalize any track limit breaches occurring at the apex of turn 6. And they go on to clarify that track limit infringements are almost universally enforced based on principal video evidence from a fixed CCTV camera of adequate resolution, pointed to clearly see a car's position in relation to the track limit boundary. The
This is real
CCTV
Drew
camera
stuff.
for turn 6. Yes, it really is. Thanks for indulging me, audience.
Of course.
The CCTV camera for turn 6 did not meet that standard, as it did not cover the apex of the corner. You had one job.
Yeah. What was I looking at?
Oh, no.
Must have been a beautiful
The guy going, you're all...
Chicks.
rule of thirds,
Chicks.
Had to get the sky in there,
Yeah, watch any race from 10 years ago, and you'll see the cameras finding chicks in the audience.
Oh God, you're right.
Yeah.
Occasionally that energy still manifests. It's like, oh, look who's in the garage, and you'll get a little bit of the vintage F1 energy.
Look, man,
but it's shocking.
All I want is the Monaco grid boys back. That's it.
That's right.
Is that too much to ask?
That's right.
Those beautiful gentlemen.
Yeah, so the stewards are basically saying, like, look, you can't submit onboard cameras, even if it shows Albon going off track, because we have to have that for everyone. And this turn 6 thing, turns out the camera wasn't on, or wasn't in focus, or the lens cap was on, or something. I don't know.
It's real some Agent 47 tactics there.
That's right.
Yeah.
So this also dovetails into this next article here, that the FIA, is from Autosport, set to tighten up the F1 right of review procedure. So the article states that originally there was no time limit on a right of review request, so a team could in theory challenge the result of a race that took place months earlier.
Which is interesting because they can't change the result, right? That far out. Isn't there there is a memorandum or a moratorium on them actually changing it like very soon after the weekend, I thought.
Right, which has sporting implications, which I'll get to. So that was subsequently changed to 14 days, a limit that this article points out. Haas took full advantage of when collating its evidence for the Circuit of the Americas appeal. The plan is to change that to 96 hours from the end of the completion and to add a fee to it, 6,000 euros. Which will be refunded only if the right of review is upheld by the stewards. So I think this is to cut down on not only the window that you can apply for this kind of stuff, but teams might not be doing it willy-nilly, although 6,000 euros, not a lot, again, for Red Bull, but maybe for Haas if they're issuing a lot of these. Maybe it'll get them to think twice. But to your point, Danny, or go ahead, Rob.
Well, just remember how, like, the FIA was like, we need more money to administer this sport.
This is
the degree to which they're putting like little toll booths on sport administration tasks.
They got their speeding ticket allocations. They're trying to pump their numbers up, man.
So regarding your question, Danny, at the moment, teams can submit a notice of intention to appeal and then have 96 hours during which they can decide whether or not they then pursue that matter with a formal appeal. The problem with that system is that a notice of intention to appeal can suspend a penalty.
Oh.
So thus, a driver could receive a grid penalty and have it negated by a notice of intention to appeal. The team could then withdraw from the appeal process, having raced from the original grid position.
That is amazing. Why does everyone not do that?
I don't know.
That sounds great. Have they just accidentally told everyone this new amazing tactic?
From now on, even if the notice is withdrawn, the matter will be referred to the International Court of Appeal, and the team concerned could receive a penalty if it was deemed that they gained an advantage through the process.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Game in the system.
Leaving the track and gaining an advantage.
Rules
Leaving
for
the
rules.
And gaining an advantage.
Yeah, there are now rules for the rules. That's what we need to.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll be adding rules to those rules soon.
Well, someone to oversee those rules, perhaps. Rob?
We've lost
a new F1 commissioner.
We've lost another one. We've lost another journalist has fallen. It's been taken away from us.
Yeah, longtime listener to the show will recognize the name Fritz Dieter Rankin as a guy we've also often cited when it comes time to get the really hot paddock goss. Like very knowledgeable motorsports journalist, also like clearly has like incredible sourcing up and down the grid. Very opinionated guy, very quick to tee off in his articles. And the FIA appointed him F1 commissioner. New position. Someone to...
They gave him a badge.
Well, and there's another great question. What does an F1 commissioner do? Well, it's not going to be like the commissioner of a sports league like the NFL or NBA, where that's someone who is directly accountable to the team owners, because he's not... FOM didn't appoint Rankin to didn't appoint Rankin to be commissioner of F1. So this is the FIA doing this, and it is like the brief for this is assisting in the formulation and implementation of improvements for F1 on behalf of the governing body, and that will also apparently part of what he's going to be doing is working on framing the new Concord Agreement.
Interesting.
Which, the stakes for that are always pretty high, given that's sort of the operating agreement for F1 as it is currently constituted. But it is just hysterically funny to me that, he's quit journalism to go run the sport he covers.
This is great.
Can you imagine, like, this is the columnist's dream, right?
Right? You get the keys to the castle. So that's how I'm thinking. Like, none of us are Dieter Rankin. But who knows? Like, maybe we could be deputies. You know what I mean? Maybe like what's our eventual play here? After 10 years of Shift F1, maybe it's time to parlay this into some, I'm sure he's got a nice little 401k on this bad boy. You know what I mean? Like he reports to a sultan.
Really? Because the FIA is charging €6,000 to look at challenges coming out of races.
Okay, good point.
Is that funding his salary? Where it's like, sorry, man, it's been a bad quarter. Not a lot of reviews.
You can go to every race. You can sleep in the media box for the weekends at every race. It's wild. What a crazy shift. And it's not necessarily like a skill set that feels like it's like I have no idea what Fritz Dieter Rankin's experience is outside of the articles I've written or read from him, but I would have thought that this was a bit outside of that boundary, perhaps. I don't know.
Well, but it's a position that is aided by knowing everyone.
Yeah,
right. Like this is the he's the go-between. He's like the FIA is like, well, what do people think? And the people in F1 are like, well, what's the FIA doing?
I don't want to give him too much credit, but I feel like he called that Porsche and Red Bull was not going to happen 2 weeks before that fell apart. Like he saw early that there were going to be problems with that marriage, and sure enough, it collapsed sort of at the altar. But like he had sort of identified what the key issues were. So yeah, like I think that's very much to the point of being able to speak to the interests of the sport, to the drivers, and to manufacturers. Useful skills, especially if you do have those contacts that really, it's been pretty clear. The teams don't really like Ben Salam. Like he doesn't have a lot of juice or a lot of trust with the orgs, whereas Stefano Domenicali does. Like everyone knows him up and down the grid. So I could see this as being a way like this is somebody that the F1 leadership will deal with maybe a little more comfortably than Salam.
Well. We shall see if he gets a warm or a cold reception. Yeah. Boy, I wish I could just throw right to myself, but we have to do an ad break.
We do.
We are done with the news. What were we going to say, Danny?
No, you're right. I was like, this is a segue, but there's an ad in here.
I know.
So
we're going to take a break, and then we will be right back with the track walk. And we're back. With the track walk, Danny. I feel beautiful Las Vegas.
Beautiful Las Vegas. I feel I consume a lot of F1 media. I don't listen to this podcast. I listen to other things out there. And I'm just going to say this. We called this whole cold Vegas thing like 6 months ago.
Oh, yeah.
This was, we were tip of the spear on this one. As most likely the West Coast of the United States most popular Formula One podcast. I'm just going to go out and say that right now. There's a very good chance.
Northern California's most popular.
Absolutely. I feel like we knew this was coming a long time ago when they said, we're going to do a race in Vegas. And we were like, oh, that's cool. November. It won't be too hot. That's great. Days are very manageable. At nighttime, what? Are you insane? And now it seems like that's sort of the conversation that everyone's having this week is, oh, do you know Vegas gets super cold at night? Do you know it gets to 5 degrees Celsius? Like it could get below freezing if you're in the wrong part. It's high up and it's high desert. It's, once the sun disappears, it gets super chilly. And guess what? F1 cars, tires, brakes, the whole shebang, not necessarily super tuned for that. We got some news to talk about in relation to the conditions in a second, but just a quick little update or a history lesson, I guess. As you know, this is not the first Grand Prix to have been raced in the City of Sin, but it is the first Las Vegas Grand Prix. The other ones in 1981 and 1982 were the Caesars Palace Grand Prix. And I think that's an important distinction because these were very much promotional sort of races paid for in part by the casino to try and drive people into them. And ultimately, it was the lack of foot traffic that it brought into the casino, which is the reason why F1 stopped racing there. It was actually taken over by IndyCar for a few years after that. They did race in the same car park. It was a sort of I forget what it was. Was it Andretti. Somebody's called it a Mickey Mouse track, and if you look at the pictures of it, it almost looks like a go-kart track. It just keeps going in and around itself. Basically looks like a driver's ed sort of track. So obviously it wasn't very popular. It didn't drive people into the city. It didn't do what Caesar's Palace required it to do. And after 82, we had another North American race that didn't last more than a couple of years. This track, on the other hand, when it was announced in 2021 or 2, I feel like this one came out of nowhere, was quite different because it's a long track. It takes up a large part of the city. It's down the strip. It's 6.2 kilometers, about 3.85 miles, which constitutes about 50 laps. So it's closer to Spa than Monaco. So it's a long
3.85 miles.
Yeah,
6.2 kilometers. Yeah, that's 50 laps. That's I didn't realize that.
It's a big one. 17 corners counterclockwise. It's got almost 2 kilometers straight in it. If you look at it, according to Reddit, if you look at the track, it does look like Spider Pig. It looks like a pig, an upside down pig, like a pig walking along the roof
ceiling,
like in the Simpsons movie.
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah. And there's a couple of other things to worry about here as well. New surface. They've lined the streets. They've resurfaced all of these streets. Apparently, it's been a nightmare in Vegas for the past couple of months as they've done this. The other thing that needs to be sort of talked about is the lack of high-speed corners. So we have 2 straights on this track. The first straight, which is incredibly long. It's like Baku, basically, is what it looks like. With a right hand, it's like reverse Baku because it's going in the sort of other direction. I mean, the start finish straight is not as long. The back straight is a really, really long one. And then there are all of these low speed corners, these sort of like slow down arena sections, but they don't have high speed corners in them, which is a problem. The fact that they have these straights and then these sort of sharp, the straights are an issue for the brakes, first of all, because there's going to be large parts of the track where the cars are driving into cold air and not using their brakes and then having to brake for a 90-degree turn at the end. So it's going to be super interesting to see how people deal with that. And then for the rest, for the tires, there's also the issue of the fact that we don't have high-speed corners that are ultimately where they get a lot of the energy put into the tires in terms of heat. So it's really up in the air as to how this is going to affect the cars. The cars do drive sometimes in cold conditions. There were races in Turkey. I remember the Eiffel Grand Prix in 2020 where it was particularly cold. Obviously, they, for years and years and years, did preseason testing in Catalonia during a time of the year where it's actually quite chilly around there. But they weren't in race condition. They were doing testing for lots of other things, and they can, it's not the same as them strapping themselves up for a full race weekend. So there's a lot of unknowns going into this, and the conditions are just sort of the tip of that iceberg.
Yeah, and I've been trying to gather from various articles about just how much this could be a problem, or maybe not at all. I've got a couple from Autosport here. You're right, Danny. Both of them point out that the problem is compounded by the length of that straight, and the fact that there are a lack of high-speed corners. But yeah, as Pirelli Motorsport boss Mario Isola explains, we had in Barcelona some preseason tests with similar temperatures, but Barcelona is a different circuit where you put more energy into the tires.
Right.
He goes on to say that they did discuss increasing the tire blanket temperatures and the allowed duration, but quote, 70 degrees, that's Celsius, is a temperature that allows you to go out with a tire that has a good level of grip. So they're not doing that.
Right.
Adam Cooper at Autosport also says that some parts of the power units themselves don't like getting too cold. Specifically, he mentions the plenum chamber.
Oh, of course.
No, well. But Red Bull chief engineer Paul Monaghan thinks that teams will figure it out. He says, I'm not too worried about sorting the car cooling out, to be honest. I don't think it will be that bad. We ran our first promotional day back in February this year, and I was sitting there shivering at Silverstone, wishing I wasn't there. and we could make it run. But as you say, Danny, getting the tires in the right temperature, as always, will be the trick. Because if they're too cold, they won't have enough grip, which will cause the cars to either be slow around those corners or to spin out. And at a street circuit, it's unforgiving. So if you lose traction, you might be in the wall. And the other thing is, if that happens, everybody else will have the task of warming their tires behind the safety car. So as they often say in American racing, yellows breed yellows.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
That we could have, say, like cascade effect here.
And I hadn't considered that about Barcelona, actually, that like you can think about the first sector of Barcelona. It's uphill, so your tire is leaning into the track. You get all that extra adhesion and heat into it there, and it's just like the world's longest right-hander. It never stops. So they start that lap basically doing a super high-speed section, and then there's plenty of high-speed corners for the rest of it, but it's like a primer. Like, all right, the start of that track is, all right, here we go, first turn, it's gonna get your tires up to spec. Whereas on this one, it's gonna be, okay, do a big straight and then stop, and then drive a little bit and then stop, and then just when your tire is probably getting a little bit of heat into it, we're gonna make you do a 2 kilometer straight. Right? like it just seems like a particularly, I mean, there's nothing you could do about it, right? These are roads that exist, but it does, I think what'll be interesting from a competitive perspective, safety aside, because obviously we hope that it's not like crazy and people are losing traction and stuff, but it'll be interesting to see if like all boats rise, all boats fall, or whether or not there are some cars that deal with it better than others.
Yeah, I'm also curious about how a driver comes into a race like this, because they're all, again, on the uneven playing fields, having never driven here. Oscar Piastri had never driven at some of the, being a rookie, and Logan Sargent had never driven at some of these tracks before, but other people had, and so there's long histories of data at these tracks. Drivers have driven them before. Julian Palmer over at Formula1.com had an interesting article. How do F1 drivers prepare for an all-new race like Vegas? He says, dialing in on the simulator is critical. I wish he would have gone in more in this article to how do you scan the track? Like, at what point do you start building that track? Probably before it's even announced what the circuit is, right?
Because
I want to know process.
If you learn on the wrong version of the track, that's also not good.
Probably. So to start off, he's talking about the simulator. I do a long run and he's referring to when he had to do this for Baku.
Oh yeah, okay.
I do a long run just to get used to where the track goes. Then with every stop and discussion with the engineers, you head back out and it starts to feel a little more familiar. Once you get comfortable, you can then start to lean on the car more, start experimenting with the lines and the curves, and get back to more performance-focused sessions. Track walks also provide a chance to see for yourself what the curbs look like, which is a huge part of the circuit's makeup. Can you take the curbs? Do they have big drops on the back edge, which could damage the car? What's in the runoff area? Is it AstroTurf, which could be slippery, or is it asphalt, which could rubber in slightly through the weekend and open up the track width?
Wow.
As a driver, you try and use all the information you can to get an early feel for the track. By the time free practice 1 comes, you should know your way around the circuit almost perfectly. I thought that was amazing. Of course, the early laps will still feel slightly different as you absorb the actual feeling of driving the circuit for real and feel the grip level, particularly in the low temperatures expected in Vegas. But by the end of the first run, things should be relatively back to normal.
That's wild.
It's also good to learn the corner numbers well before heading to the track. It's easy to learn where you have to turn, but remembering which corner is which is also important in providing concise and accurate feedback to the team immediately. Sometimes on a new circuit, you might even tape a track map in the cockpit for the first sessions.
That's so cool.
And your engineer will have access to one easily as well, so that when you are discussing certain corners, you can be sure that you are on the same page.
That's really cool. That's like some World War II shit right there. Like putting the little map, taping the map to the inside of your cockpit, or the drop zone or something. Man,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just funny. It's like that's another element as well. Throw it into the mix that the drivers have never driven here as well. And we don't know, those first two Baku races, like there was a lot of skepticism going into Baku. We're like, what are you guys doing? Petro state, the world's like this. It wasn't as long as China's straight, the world's biggest straight in F1, longest straight ever, but it was a very long straight. And then we were driving in this sort of like little town for a while, lots of 90-degree turns in Baku. And then those first couple of races in Baku were pretty good races.
Yep.
And then suddenly Baku
because of the reasons like this.
Exactly. So it's super hard to tell. Like we could end up with a procession, we could end up with chaos, we could end up with some good battles. But there's enough like interesting. It reminds me of the COVID year a bit, where we had a lot of new tracks or a lot of returning tracks that had never had F1 cars like this on them, Portimao, stuff like that, Imola. And it was fun because there was just an element of unknown that every single driver and team and engineer and mechanic had to deal with. And within that chaos, interesting things emerge. So yeah, but I hadn't considered that. You're right, like all the drivers. And it's a night race. A lot of rookies don't like them. Yuki Tsunoda does not like street circuits. Other people do. Checo, traditionally, very good on them. So yeah, it's there's so many variables.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a good opportunity to just see how superhuman these people can be.
Right.
That's why I like bringing up, this article like Palmer's here. And I have another one here, if you'll indulge me.
Yeah.
About, it's also from Autosport, what Hamilton learned from following Verstappen in the U.S. Grand Prix. So Lewis Hamilton was asked in Mexico City on Thursday. This was from a few days ago. What he learned, and he gave more insight into the strengths of the dominant Red Bull car. I also just think like, what can a driver tell us about this car that we've watched just dominate the entire season? Like, please tell us a little bit of the secrets of what we're actually watching. Lewis says, I think the only places that we are probably on a level with them is in the low speed. Our car has generally been good in low speed over the past couple of years, but the higher speed you go, the more separation of them. That's why you see them so quick at places like Suzuka. It's always a good experience to be behind them because you can see firsthand where the car is stronger. They can get on the power earlier than most of us. The car moves a lot less. The degradation of the tires is much, much easier to manage. I've been in that position before where I've had a much more stable rear end. It's so much easier to keep the temperatures lower on the tire and to go longer. They've just done a better job in that space where they have a more stable platform to which it's much, much easier to drive for Max. So that's why when you see him get out of the car, he's not even sweating. He generally isn't sweating.
It's interesting. And it's, one of the things that I did notice is that Hamilton does a lot of, everyone kind of does it, but even when he was like dominant in the sport, he did a lot of like thanking the team back home for putting this car together. Like he never sort of hid behind the fact that they had a really good car. Whereas like, I feel like, I never got that vibe from Schumacher, maybe, you know what I mean? Like some of them are a bit less deferential than that, maybe. And I'm not sure if we get that. It's also, there's a difference in that, like obviously Verstappen and Perez are on Perez in the same car as Max, and he's not getting out of it what Max is, right? So like Max is obviously a talent and part of that equation as well. But yeah, it is. I think we were spoiled in that one season in the 2021 where we had that great battle between the two of them. And it's funny with the article that Rob was talking about earlier with the popularity of F1 with the GM interest. I do have this little bit of a concern that while a lot of these newer fans were brought in with Drive to Survive, they also had a fairly competitive, like a lot of them who came in during that season, that a really competitive season to enjoy. And if it's not going to benefit anyone if we don't have any competition at the top. And I am starting to get a little bit concerned that if we enter the third year of this, much like we endured many years of this with Hamilton at the front, that it's just not going to be, it's not going to be worth it.
Well, go ahead, Rob.
Well, I was just going to say, like, my one point to that is, like, I think it is possible. It's just this is the way that F1's fortunes will wax and wane. Like, they're committed to, this is the identity of the sport.
Yeah.
Which is that, such as it is, it's a meritocracy. We're not going to do balanced performance type stuff. Like, you got the fast car, you win. And that can happen year after year. And if that hurts the sport, it'll hurt the sport. But I think F1 has made this historic. And I think F1 probably has the argument that it actually unbalanced doesn't, right? Like, Schumacher was an international celebrity. Like, people, like, his reputation is a little more checkered now, and not everyone enjoyed those years. But, like, Ferrari and Schumacher were a big story. Ferrari doing well was a huge thing for F1.
How about Vettel and the Red Bull, though? How about those years? I feel like that might have been maybe more damaging.
That was, I mean, I think there was a bit of people were kind of annoyed that Red Bull were the ones doing it. Like, it was a team without pedigree, and then you had this young guy kind of showing up and doing it. But
that's fair. Yeah.
It did kind of feel like that is probably the era my own interest waned the most. I think it was harder for me to watch back then. But I mean, like, F1's popularity boom happened when you could basically send the trophy to Mercedes at the start of the year. You just do.
That's when our podcast basically charted that trajectory.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know. That's when I fell in love with the sport. So I don't know if the conditions aren't exactly the same. But no. I could still see it happening. But I could also see it, turning some people off because we got such an amazing 2021, right at the peak. People were tired from COVID and they wanted something new, and Drive to Survive was hot, and so I don't know.
Chase Carey had that big mustache, just everything aligned. Everything aligned.
It really did. Well, let's see if the weather is going to align for us in Las Vegas. We're looking at 10 p.m. start time for both qualifying and the race. And at the current forecasts, it looks to be about 60 degrees Fahrenheit on qualifying day. That's 16 Celsius. Precipitation, 24%. So we could even get a little bit of a damp qualifying session. Race day, even colder, 14 Celsius or 58 Fahrenheit. Precipitation, only 3% though. So not as frigid maybe as we were expecting.
Yeah.
Initially, but still not very warm.
No.
Driver standings as we head into the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Max Verstappen on top. Sergio Perez in second, 258 points to Lewis Hamilton's 226. Fernando Alonso's in fourth with 198. Lando Norris in fifth with 195. Carlos Sainz sixth, 192. That is close. Charles Leclerc, we only have 2 races, everyone, remaining.
That's crazy.
Charles Leclerc's in, I know. Charles Leclerc's in 7th with 170 points. George Russell in 8th with 156. Then a jump down to Oscar Piastri in 9th with 87. Lance Stroll's in 10th with 63. Pierre Gasly has 62. Esteban Ocon is in 12th with 46. Alex Albon is in 13th with 27 points. Yuki Tsunoda's in 14th with 13. Valtteri Bottas in 15th with 10 points. And we've got Nico Hulkenberg with 9, Daniel Ricciardo and Zhou Guan Yu with 6, Kevin Magnussen with 3, Liam Lawson with 2, Logan Sargent with 1, and Nick DeVries with 0. In the constructor standings with 2 races to go, Red Bull Racing, of course, is on top. Mercedes is in second with 382. Ferrari's in third with 362. Boy, a bad weekend for Mercedes and a good one for Ferrari.
Yeah.
Things could change very quickly. McLaren's in fourth with 282. What is that? 80 points? That's a big gap. Aston Martin's in fifth with 261. Alpine's in sixth with 108. Williams is in seventh with 28. AlphaTauri is in eighth with 21. Alfa Romeo is in ninth with 16. And Gene Haas and team in 10th with 12 points. If you'd like to join the standings yourself, you can do so with the link in the show notes for our fantasy league. You can also send us an email, shift1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. Rob, what kind of emailage do we have this week?
So Adrian writes in, sorry, this is a total Homer email that I'm reading, but I have to share the good news. Next time I'm in town, I got to hit this place up.
Okay.
Adrian writes, hi, speedy race car aficionados. I had a work thing in Chicago, and because I had never been, I stretched out my visit so I could spend a few days exploring the city with my girlfriend. Since it was the weekend of the Brazil GP, she did a bit of research and found a bar within walking distance of our hotel that was planning to show the race.
Excellent.
The bar is called Theory, www.theorychicago.com, in the River North neighborhood, close to tons of shopping and hotels. Not knowing what to expect, we showed up like we usually show up in my hometown of Knoxville, just as the race was starting. Unlike the beer garden, Schultzbrow, where I watch F1 in Knoxville, this place was packed. Standing room only, all tables taken, all seats at the bars taken. As I stood there dumbfounded by the crowd and looking around for some hint of a spot we could claim, the lights went out, Albon's tire exploded, the crowd exploded, and my eardrums nearly exploded. I've never been to an F1 race, so I wasn't prepared for every eyeball in the place to be glued to the action and responding to every crash, near accident, overtake like this. With the red flag out to clean up bits of Haas and Williams, things settled down. My girlfriend said, let's see if we can make some friends. She spotted some girls in their 20s wearing Brazil's colors and noticed they had 2 extra chairs at their table. A few quick bits of Portuguese later, and we had some new friends to watch the race with.
Wow,
it was
nice.
an amazing, and importantly, maybe some seats. It was an amazing place to watch the race and was the kind of experience I previously thought I'd only have in person at an actual F1 event. I'm still looking forward to going to my first F1 race, but this experience taught me that there are great, inexpensive F1 experiences out there that don't require traveling to a track. You just have to know where to go on race day. I'd highly recommend checking out a race at Theory for any F1 fans that live in Chicago or might be visiting. Maybe show up an hour or two before the race so you can claim a good spot, though. Holy shit, that sounds awesome.
That's really cool.
Like, that is... Next time I'm in Chicago during F1 season, I got to hit that place up. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, I know that there are watch parties at various pubs in San Francisco. I've never been to any, but I imagine.
Is it the Kazar, the San Francisco F1 group? Is it the Kazar pub? I think it might be Kazar on Stanion. I think that's where they are.
Okay.
Go to their... I think they have a meetup.com page or something. But yeah, if you're in the Bay Area, I've heard. I was going to...
If there isn't one in your town, start it.
Yeah. I was going to go to their place finally in 2020 when I moved back from the East Coast, and then COVID said no to that. I'd love to check that out. When you find a good bar for that stuff, like there's an Arsenal bar in San Francisco, Maggie McGarry's, which is just like the best if you're an Arsenal fan. Once you find like one of those places, you hold on to it for dear life. But yeah, that's really cool. If you're send up more emails in, if y'all have like, especially somewhere where there's not races on. Like, I think that's really cool to hear that.
I have actually watched an F1 race in a bar, but it was in Kiev.
Oh, cool.
And I walked in, and the woman at the front said, "This way we have the football. This way we have the formula." There were 2 rooms for viewing.
The formula.
Yeah.
Pick an F. I love it.
Should I take this next
Drew,
one?
you want to take this next one?
Yes. Adam writes, here's an idea for sprint weekends. Yes. Sprint shootouts and sprint races are run by a team's 3rd driver. Whatever points they score in the sprint race go towards the team's Constructors' Championship total, and perhaps there is an individual Champ of the Sprints award. The benefits are the sprint is still meaningfully connected to the entirety of the race weekend, but doesn't detract from the GP because it is a genuinely different race, i.e. it isn't just a mini version of the full race. Teams get to test out young drivers in a race setting, so the up-and-coming talent gets a better shot to show why they deserve a seat in the Grand Prix, and we get more talented drivers and storylines to follow, cheer, and argue over. It is easy enough to skip for those hardcore purists who don't care for anything besides the main event. I'd love to hear what you all think of this idea, and if you like it, any suggestions or tweaks you might introduce. Let's fix sprint weekends from the grassroots. Cheers, Adam.
That's a genuinely good idea. The only initial problem I can think of, and I don't know if this is the case, is whether or not the drivers themselves are a big part of getting bums on seats on the Saturday. Whether or not people will be disappointed. I guess qualifying is still, well, no, if it's sprint day, then it's all day. You know, whether, you know what I mean? Like whether or not like someone's a big Checo fan or someone's a big Carlos Sainz fan or a Verstappen fan, like they're going to want to see that driver. And if you do all sprint stuff on that day and that person's like, I'm only going to go to the weekend for one day, then maybe it takes a hit. Because that's been the problem with the sprint weekends is that there's no interest. So I'm not sure if this raises interest if you remove the drivers. But from a competitive and sporting perspective, I love this. This sounds great.
Yeah. Totally agree.
I dig it. I pulled this one out of the inbox just because it was like, this actually does seem like it would address a lot of the deficiencies with, like, the stakes are too low for the drivers who are in the main championship. The idea of like, we'll have a separate sprint championship is idiotic. If you're saying that that's going to mean anything to the guys who are fighting for the F1, and it won't be basically the same driver in the best car, but the third driver thing introduces a real interesting wrinkle.
Here's a question: whose car did they take out?
You'd have to do a third car. That is
right.
That is the rub.
Yeah.
Because there's no way.
They bin it on the first turn, and you're like, "Sorry, Checo, can't race tomorrow, mate."
Or like, sorry, like don't worry, buddy. I set it up just the way I like.
Yeah.
Good luck at the race tomorrow.
Yeah, like the seat's too far forward, and the rear view mirror doesn't look quite right.
Yeah.
You have to.
I wonder if you would have to do then like the qualifying is just like an open qualifying, right? Like here's an hour, whatever fastest lap you can do, go for it. It's just like a practice and qualifying thing. I mean, the teams are already compelled to put up and coming drivers in practice sessions.
Yeah, and they do it in the most
this isn't crazy.
Yeah, they do it in the most like box checking way ever as well. It's right at the end of the season, some weekend that nobody cares about. You know what I mean? It's
right.
It's always
here
done that way.
Free practice one will be driven by so and so. Who cares? And now like we can get. I think it's a cool idea. I do think it leaves like Formula 2 in a weird position because now it's like
That's true.
Your promotion purgatory can extend a year, where it's like, all right, I've had a good run in Formula 2, and now I'm going to be the reserve driver for this team, and okay, now I'm in meaningful races there as the sprints.
Sprint research continue. More sprint research required.
Yeah. Danny, you want to give this next one?
Absolutely. Glenn writes in, "Hey guys, love the pod. Just a quick message to say that it's been widely reported that Vegas tickets have been astronomical, but well, as of a week to go, multiple packages seem to have taken a nosedive in price as well as hotel pricing. Do you think this was a race organizers being punished for greed? Would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks, from Glenn in Dublin, Ireland." Well, Glenn, hope you're having a lovely time in Balia Ohaclia. So there's an aspect of this that is very like of course the hotel prices were going to be high last year, and of course they're cheaper now. Vegas is like, imagine the city you live in, and imagine the city you live in had 50 times more hotels than it needed. That's Las Vegas. Las Vegas, the Strip especially, like that part of town, nobody lives there. It's not like, I heard on a couple of other F1 podcasts I'm talking about, oh, it's a shame people who live in the area can't see the race. Nobody lives near the Strip. They all live in a different Las Vegas over there, the flat part. The Strip itself is just hotels. And they're never full. Like I've never been to Vegas and felt like, I always feel like I'm getting the nicest hotel for the cheapest price. I don't know why it's so. Maybe I'm lucky. Maybe I don't go during conventions. I don't know. So the fact that the hotel prices are cheaper now is like zero surprise to anyone who goes to Vegas. The tickets themselves, while they are cheaper, they're still quite expensive. Like I've been on looking at the various stands. It's kind of tricky because a lot of this goes through Ticketmaster as their official thing. StubHub has some as well. But the problem is that all of the stands are like privately owned. There's like the Heineken area and the T-Mobile one and the this and that. And some of them come with extra perks, and some of them are 3-day only, and some of them are 5-day, and some of them are 1 day, and all this sort of stuff. But like the cheapest tickets I saw were, there was a pair of them for 2,000, right? So that, and I was, that was in a grandstand, right? So that's like, okay, $1,000 for a ticket. Like that's not cheap.
With the seat?
A lot of the GA stuff is taken. That's what I've seen, is a lot of like the cheaper alternatives to it, which arguably in a race like Vegas would be one. But also it's not like GA. I don't think it's GA like other general admission, like other circuits where you can go everywhere. Like the GA ticket at COTA is fantastic because there's loads of outdoor places you can go to.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you buy your ticket for your zone here. And the zones are very sort of defined. So I don't know. I don't think it's as cheap as people are letting on necessarily. The hotels definitely are like 80% cheaper than they were. It seems to be for a lot of places. But it's still going to be an expensive race. And I think when people look at those tickets, like loads of the other ones I saw were like, oh, there's two beside each other for 5,000 still, and like at that stage, pick any race in the world that you want to actually go to that won't be freezing.
Yeah, it's also just a complete unknown, right? Like
it is. Yeah. And a weekend in Vegas without the race is good fun. Like you could, what I mean? Like if you're into that sort of thing, I think Vegas is a very silly town. It's a very easy place to have good fun in. And I think it's also a place that you don't end up having to spend a fortune. Like if you don't, I don't bet or do anything like that. Like I'll spend 20, 30 quid on a blackjack table for a couple of minutes and that'll do me fine. I don't have that muscle, but
losing money fast has never been my idea.
No, it's not fun. Time. Me and my brother went to a UFC event there. It was like his 40th birthday and it was right before the pandemic. It was like February 2020. And we went to Vegas for his, or it was January actually for that. It was like the first time I was able to like spoil my older brother and do something nice with him. And we sat down at a blackjack table and both of us were $250 up after like 30 minutes. I was like, whoa, dude. And then we were down to 200. We were like, okay, let's go. Like, I know the direction this is going in.
Yep.
I think the last thing I'd say to this point, though, is like one of the things that I sort of bear in mind is that one of the ways that you can sort of like being flexible and having a lot of resources is like its own like that sort of comes with wealth and security. And so you can do things like, you know what? I'm not going to book a hotel because I am convinced that like at the last minute,
good point.
If I need a hotel room, I'll be able to buy one. And you can just wait out the fact that like if it doesn't work and it goes the wrong way and you end up getting like completely hosed on a hotel price, you can afford to eat that. But the odds are you're going to see at the last minute, the price breaks are going to hit and you're going to get for a fraction. But for most of us who have to plan these things and budget them out, you're going to, when those tickets go on sale, and it's like, here's the cost to secure your spot, to make sure that like this entire weekend is going to come off well, they charge you for that peace of mind. It's the same thing. God, I just went through this with Drew's wedding. Boy, like there's a reason they charge you money for the refundable versus non-refundable shit.
Yeah.
And if you're in a position to be like, you know what, give me the refundable. I'm like 90% sure I'm gonna do this, but like, you know what, fuck it, I can afford that extra money in case I have to cancel.
Peace of mind.
Yeah, that's meaningful. But there's a reason they charge that. Where it's like you can get a little cheaper, but then that money's just gone if anything goes wrong. So this really needs to come off, or you can have flexibility for more money. So I look at this and these last minute price breaks are kind of predictable, but a lot of the people who are going to this probably didn't feel confident in just leaving it to the last minute.
So if you're booking a flight, especially, and you want to make it a whole thing, and I think, I we have like local knowledge. Like in my head, I'm like, worst case scenario, just get a hotel in Barstow and just you drive an hour every day. You know what I mean? Like, not a big deal. But I totally get it. Like if this was your big thing, and like Vegas means that you can bring your better half or your family and make it more of a weekend for everyone, then the last thing you're going to do is risk that one. So yeah, I guess it is predatory. I wonder if next year they've signed a 10-year deal, right? I think I heard that.
Is it really 10 years?
I think it is, which seems insane considering they've not had a race here yet.
Right.
But I mean,
how long was the Vietnam contract?
That's a good point. Fool me once. You know what I mean? Like I feel like they won't. This is a trick that only works once, probably. So we'll see.
I still wish we would have seen the Vietnam track.
It did look very silly. Like I would like to see them drive on a wishbone. I'm trying to see if this was a 10-year thing. I read that or heard that somewhere.
While you're looking that up, Rob, do you want to take this last one?
Yeah. Adam writes, can you clear up something I'm confused about? I constantly hear Crofty and Brundle talking about dirty air and cars getting unsettled if they follow too close, but in the same breath, they are also talking about getting a slipstream and punching a hole in the air to get a tow. Which is it? Does following end you up in dirty air or a tow? Am I missing something? It feels like they just commentate with whatever terminology fits the narrative they're trying to develop to make their commentary engaging. Keep up the great work. So there's a bit of that, but really, like, you can see this. I think you saw it really clearly with like at Austin. Remember when Max had that spin out heading into the final corner and was like nice, real nice, because Perez had gone through the corner a moment before, and it wasn't like he was like right there. He had just been through like a moment before, but even trailing quite a distance, going through a series of corners, the disturbed air took enough downforce off Max's wing that like the car's handling changed dramatically. I think this is one of the real problems with like why the overtaking and following stuff, like why this has been such a, challenging problem for F1 to solve, is that the slipstream is real. The slipstream is a close range phenomenon. Like if you want to see where slipstreams are really powerful, look at oval racing, IndyCar or NASCAR. Those guys are hurtling along, kind of nose to tail, and that is where they're like driving in the draft, and that's how you gain like a lot of speed from the slipstream. It doesn't take too long before you fall back from that you start getting, it starts to turn into a bit more of a ambiguous impact, that you're starting to get turbulence more than you are getting a draft that like allows you to hit less air resistance and pick up speed. And that's if you're like driving in a straight line. With F1 cars, with all the cornering and how aero dependent they are, that disturbed air can linger quite a bit. And so, the range at which you get a tow is pretty close. The range at which your handling gets all screwed up with the dirty air is quite long. This is why you see those ridiculous traffic jams every qualifying. If everyone could just be like, well, great, I've got a car in front of me and I'll get a tow, they would do that. But there's a reason they're going to wild lengths to try to put like a few seconds between them and the car up the road. And so that's kind of the difference, is like slipstream is really powerful and it only kicks in like when you're really close. Prior to that, the dirty air will make it harder for you to ever get close. And
you're right. And I think it's the thing that the dirty air sticks around. It's dirty for much longer than you might expect. The only close comparison that I can draw, and it's probably not applicable to most of our audience, but when you are flying a small plane,
right,
and there are jets landing and taking off,
wake turbulence, right,
at your runway, they will tell you, like air traffic control will say caution wake turbulence, because 1 or 2 minutes after the jet goes by, it still will cause turbulence for you. So you have to wait
1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah,
isn't that amazing?
Have you ever done like recreational boating? You know how like everyone loses their shit if someone goes through like a slow zone too fast and like kicks up too much wake?
No wake.
No wake.
Yeah, it's incredibly bad form, and part of it is because it disturbs everyone. It makes handling weird. It's not a pleasant physical experience, but it's a similar sort of thing where these turbulent effects like really linger.
It's so bizarre. It's like, if we could, and it's funny, it's a great question to ask, and I feel like it's a question we get asked every second year probably, right? We readdress this sort of thing, and it's so fascinating because it's like, it just, I don't know, not to get like weirdly philosophical or about the human condition or anything, but it is so funny how we relate to the world based on what we see and what we feel. And it's like, there's so much about like watching sport that is a visual thing, right? We're just taking in feedback, and it's just, if we could see air as like the sort of soup that it is, we just can't.
Really interesting.
But if we could, it would completely change our perspective on lots of things, including this. Like, we'd be able to, I bet like flight anxiety would disappear overnight for most people, because they'd be able to see when, like the bumps in the road, in the sky, they'd be able to see a lot of the, the hot wind coming off of a mountain range that makes a bit of turbulence, or, but because we don't see this stuff, it's like this ethereal, unknown thing. So yeah, I don't know. Watch some, go on YouTube and watch some like computational fluid dynamic videos of aerodynamics and stuff, and you'll get a pretty good idea of what it's supposed to look like, I guess.
Shift+F1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/email. So you can also hit us up on the socials.
10 years. 10 years. 10 years. Vegas.
10 years.
Vegas.
It's 10 years of Vegas.
That's
10 years
wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was a 3-year deal, and then 7 they extended it to 2032.
My goodness.
Yeah, there you go.
You can hit us up on the socials, which are linked in our show notes. That's us around the internet. Should we take it around the world of racing?
Let's race around the world. Yeah.
We are getting down to it. There are not many racing series still going, but still going is the World Rally Championship. The Forum 8 Rally Japan is this weekend out of the town of Toyota,
Oh my God, that's amazing.
which is
Was it built?
in the Aichi Prefecture.
Oh.
But looking here at the Wikipedia page, a town formerly known as Koromo. And yes, it is exactly what you're thinking.
Wow.
They renamed it because all of Toyota's headquarters are here.
They renamed it Toyota. That seems like kind of mean. I don't know. Toyota. Not even
due to
I
the
feel
Toyota.
weird
fame-
about that.
Just
The fame and economic importance of its major employer, the city of Koromo changed its name to Toyota on January 1st, 1959.
Oh wow, okay, a while ago. It's a shame like Nintendo's not based out of some like old town or like I don't know what else.
It is, isn't it? Isn't it?
It's in Osaka, isn't it? I thought.
No, I thought. Is it? I thought it was Kyoto.
Oh,
Wait,
it
is
is
Osaka
Kyoto,
not
yeah.
an old town?
That's not small though, right?
They're all old towns. Yeah.
Good point.
Okay, so World Rally Championship MotoGP is at the Lusail International Circuit
Oh,
in Doha, Qatar.
low sale.
Thank you, Danny.
You're welcome.
And Macau is
Oh.
this weekend. The World Cup of Macau. It's a non-championship Formula 3 race. If you've never heard of this race, but it is highly prestigious. So this article on Race Fans has compiled people who have graduated or have raced in this in the past. Many future Formula One greats raced at Macau, including Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, but only a handful of them have won it. So here are the winners: Ayrton Senna, Mauricio Gugelmin, Martin Donnelly, David Brabham, Michael Schumacher, David Coulthard, Ralph Schumacher, Ralph Furman, Takuma Sato, and Lucas Di Grassi.
Nice.
So if you win Macau, it's a very tight, tough street circuit, and is actually a lot of fun to watch. And I will put a link in the show
Cool.
notes to the FIA YouTube channel, which will live stream it.
You guys ever
I
been to that
recommend it.
part of the world down near there? It's like Hong Kong, China, kind of.
I've never been to Hong Kong
No, we're in there.
or
Macau, mainland China or Taiwan.
I have been
or,
to,
yeah.
yeah, I've been to Taiwan and
Oh, you have.
yes,
That's pretty close to Macau,
and
isn't it?
Beijing. Yeah, I guess so.
Cool. Oh, and you've been to Beijing. Nice.
Yeah, that was where I
And
uh,
North Korea.
flew into North Korea.
Yeah, good point. I'm asking.
No
oh,
direct
wait,
flights from SFO.
You've been to Beijing, have you, Drew? That's a very interesting part of Asia.
Yes. Formula One, though, also this weekend. And check these times out. Free Practice 1, Thursday, November 16th at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2.
Eastern time. Nice.
And then Free Practice 2 is Friday, November 17th at 3 a.m. on ESPN. Free Practice 3, 11:30 p.m. on Friday, November 17th on ESPNU. Then qualifying Saturday, November 18th, 3 a.m.
Dude.
On ESPN.
Dude. I don't think I realized they were driving it midnight local. That's
It's, yeah.
is that
10 p.m.
Yeah.
local.
Oh, 10 p.m. Oh, sorry, it's 3 a.m. Eastern. Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
Does that mean
and
the
then,
race is... Yeah, sorry, race. Go ahead. Drum roll.
Wait, I have this right?
If it's 3 a.m. Eastern, then it's midnight Vegas, right?
No, is it? No, 5 hours. Right? Now I'm confused.
Oh my God.
Because daylight savings just happened as well.
Don't
So it's
do me
still-
wrong, F1calendar.com.
Time in New York right now is like coming up on midnight, right? And it's 9 o'clock here. So it is 3 hours.
So it says, okay, yeah, qualifying is at 3 a.m.
Eastern.
Eastern,
That's midnight local.
midnight local.
Wow.
Wow.
That's wild. Does that mean the weather's going to be colder? Were you looking at 10 o'clock before?
Slightly. Yeah, I was
Okay.
looking at 10 o'clock, but maybe that's where I got confused because the times from the what I had for weather are different.
Right.
Okay, Saturday, November 18th, 3 a.m. ESPN. Sunday, November 19th, the race is at 1 a.m. on ESPN.
Wow. 1 a.m. So that's
I
10 o'clock.
I will double
That's 10
check
o'clock.
all of that before. Yes, that is 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Before I post the card to the socials about when everything is,
Yeah.
all the channels and stuff.
But that tracks. This is the thing I remember is like one of the big selling points is like it's going to be a night race in Vegas. It's going to be like daytime
City that never sleeps.
You know, for most of the international audience.
Yes.
So,
Wake up in the morning, blighty, and watch the race. Yeah. Man, that's fun. That's a good time. I'm like slightly. I had a deadline that was supposed to be done by Sunday, and now it's Friday, and now I'm like, oh, could I like? Because you can just fly from like my local airport to Vegas in like 90 minutes. It's not far. I'm like, I've driven it before. It takes about 10 hours, 9 hours. I'm like, could I just go down? Like, you know, hang out, just like not get a ticket, but
fly
just
back,
hang out, and then just fly back. I don't know. I'm kind of. I definitely don't want to spend thousands of dollars on a ticket. I'm just not arsed. But
right.
But like, is there any?
Probably find a bar.
Yeah, like, is there any? Yeah, a bar would be fun. Like, is there any like local thing I could just go and? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. Find out next week if Danny pulled the trigger.
Well, that's what's going on this weekend. What's happening in history, Danny?
Oh, in history, Drew, we could talk about so much of history. There's that new Napoleon movie coming out. There's the bubonic plague. There's the Jurassic period. But today I thought we'd talk about this day in Formula One history, November 15th. With Nelson Piquet having already won the World Championship at the previous round thanks to Nigel Mansell's accident, the Australian Grand Prix at Adelaide on this day in 1987 was an end-of-term affair. Ferrari's Gerhard Berger was brimming with confidence following his win in the last race, and he took pole position ahead of Alain Prost's McLaren. Berger got away well and led from start to finish to pick up his second consecutive win, while behind him Piquet, Prost, Senna, and Michel Alboreto battled for second place. Alboreto eventually won the duel to secure Ferrari's first 1-2 for more than 2 years. The race was the final outing in a Williams for Brazilian world champion Nelson Piquet. He moved to Lotus for the 1988 season, but never won another title. There you go. Bit of a quiet day, November 15th. Okay. Nobody tragically perished or won a championship or did something mad like qualify in the same millisecond.
Not a ton of racing happening this time of year.
It's right? True. It's true. Yeah, good point. Now I'm like, what's going on December 25th? Can I let me quickly look because we're not going to cover it. So
it's true.
On this day in 1967, Blitzen was tragically killed during a testing incident at Imola.
I'm not going to read it, am I? Because I'm worried that something tragic happened. No, you know what? We'll read it on the last episode of the season. How about that? We'll keep it.
If you remember.
If I remember. Yeah, exactly. I've got it dog-eared, so surely I can't forget now.
All right. Well, final thoughts heading into Vegas, Danny.
Can't wait. It's going to be fun. I'm going to stay up late and watch all the silly racing. I really love that place. I love the high. I love them heavy. Like, I just love spending time out there in the desert and camping and spending time in Vegas. I think it's a fun spot. And yeah, I hope from a racing perspective, if nothing else, it provides a lot of new challenges for the drivers, and then we get to enjoy them, try and wrestle with them. Yeah, let's hope it's a goodie, because the next one is sort of more. I feel like Abu Dhabi is the one race that that one season aside usually doesn't provide that much craziness unless there's a fight in the championship. And who knows? Actually, with the points, we'll have to see if there's a big shakeout with the constructors and the drivers' championship. With once all the points have been totted at the end of the race in Nevada. All right, final thoughts, Rob.
One, I think my hype levels would be so much higher if the mob still ran Vegas. And like there was just the off chance that like someone would come along and fix the USGP. That would be exciting times. The other thing that occurs to me is like I am so curious about this cold weather. Like when they ran in Turkey and they had that like unusually cold day.
Yeah.
That track was basically greased. And I remember a couple years ago, the Daytona 24 had overnight lows just above freezing. And it's interesting. It's interesting racing when this happens, but I don't know that I would qualify it as good racing because what happens is everyone starts to realize, like, especially once people go off and tires cool down behind safety car, like those overnight hours at Daytona, I don't think anybody was racing. Really.
Right.
It was watching
around,
people
surviving.
white knuckling. Yeah. Like just tiptoeing around a track. And I'm curious if these cars can actually sort of run competitive race pace in this track if it's as cold as it might be.
Well, if you'd like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift+F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.